true principles of health is what we're going to be focusing on and discussing today. And I know that my wife and Dr. Brown know about that, but one of the key factors of good health is smiling. And actually, if you look at most people, they don't smile too much, especially dentists. They're always looking down in the mouth. That's a pun. They're looking down in the mouth. And they do. I mean, we're trained to. I remember in Michigan in 1965 when I entered dental school, we were given a book of behavior. It told us exactly what was expected of us as students. The fact that we were part of an elite corps, that we got into dental school, which in a way was true because you had a lot of competition at that point, and the schools were very small, 92, no females. But they gave you this book and they told you are not to whistle in the hallways. But they could have said not smiling too, I don't know. But they did some good in terms of our training. Our training began with that book about how to dress. And part of the dressing was for your patient. That was an interesting point of view. I'd never thought of that. You know, I'm trying to look good. No, it's out of respect for the people that are listening. That kind of vibration, that kind of respect and honor. By the way, I'm honored to be able to present this to y'all and to be part of the IABDM group, and Dawn and Valeros, and Bill and his wife Joanne, leaders in this thing. And this faction, we're going to go off a little bit, is actually a blossoming of what I call the Institute of the New Principles of Health. In other words, we're going back or going forward to the past, the future. So smile power is something that I learned about in the 70s, and that's, doing good crowns. Don Ho was a patient of mine. I don't know if you know who Don Ho is, Tiny Bubbles. He's a great crooner. And he had lost all his teeth. And Don is with me right now and is saying, okay. The point is that he had gone through the series of traditional dental correction, folk mouth capping, and he ended up with a couple of implants and root canals. And I finally had to take those out because he was in decline, big time. So welcome. Renaissance of True Health is what we're going to focus on. Surfing is the key to it. Keeping ahead of the wave, so to speak, or keeping connected to nature, keeping connected to the electrification, all of the spray. In the Hawaiian tradition, they didn't know the word electronics, but it creates a vivification of the physiology of the body. And so we'll move here, and a happy future is smiling. This was one of my favorite from Norman Rockwell. It's not so much that he lost out, but the vibrations that are set out by us will come back to us. That's one of the principles we'll talk about. So if you're out fishing and you have a good attitude and it's no hook to whether in one way or not you get fish, guess what? I think the arrangement is made such that the guy, not because he's thin, but because he maybe had a good attitude, or anyway, that's an interesting picture for me. We're looking through the eyes of our future. We're actually right now seeing the reality of what was done 40 years ago with biology. The word biological dentistry did not come into use until I think it was in the 80s. And Ed Arana, who started this organization from Sebastopol, California, I met my wife at one of the conferences in '91, but I had started to use the term when I stopped using mercury. I stopped root canal therapy. I used the term biocompatible dentistry. Biocompatibility is a kissing cousin of biological dentistry. But I use biological dentistry when speaking through the lips, tongue, teeth, cheeks of eternal now. Actually, all we've got is right now, so thank you very much for your sharing your eternity with me. Biological dentology, it's a fancy, it should be dentistry, but the fact is that it's an evolving new paradigm. It started 40 years ago. I'd never heard of that. I'm from the old school. I've still got that old memory and many times reflexes that keep me doing things like very myopically. So being true to the truth, but we don't know the true truth. We know about truth, and we know that we're seeking the truth. But the true truth is a design of the Creator, I think. There's a higher power that's orchestrating and organizing this universe, and we are not only a part of it, we are it. So that's a stretch for some people. So we want to return to the origins of health, centeredness, God-centeredness, or common sense, common truthful sense, I call it. And the mandate of what, these are my credos for what I do, is first do well for people. You're my sister, my brother, and if I violate that, the law of echo will come back to me. And I don't shy away from that, but I've learned that after many, many years, that you can't sow seeds of destruction. They will come back. And that's why I said the eyes of the future are how you hold it. If you're like smiling and you're positive and upbeat as best you can. And it's hard sometimes out here. You know, the things in Washington, D.C., you know, the impeachment issues, all that, it draws on you. And it's real nice. My wife just returned from Japan, and she said it was so nice to not hear anything political about the United States. And I went, I think that's true. So I got to cool my heels on that. Or the Hippocratic Oath was first do no harm. The other quality that I think is in the consciousness, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. But sometimes we don't know if it's broken. Like root canal therapy seems to be okay. The patient has no pain. And when you see some stuff I'll show you with the root canal therapy, these are very stealth and subtle, dysregulated conditions. Biocompatible methods and materials as best we got. That's what this whole conference is about. The composites nowadays. I started using composites in 1981. I stopped using amalgam, and I'd read enough about it to say that I made that decision. Not good for me, not good for my patients. But I didn't know what else to use, and all of a sudden, arrangements are made that the composites showed up on the planet. And here they are, perfect for me. And I'd watch them in the early days. I'd put one in, and maybe 2 or 3 years later, I would see there's no wear. It's not anything that they were telling me about this. It's usable in the posterior part of the mouth, contrary to you can't use these except for anterior teeth, like that. So other biocompatible methods would be maybe not using topical fluoridation for the children. My son threw up the first time I ever did that. He was only about 4 or 5. But I remember that classically. I was starting to fluoridate his teeth, and he went, and he just barfed. Excuse the word, but that's true. And so I didn't try that again on him. Creative technology applied spirit, mind, and body. It's the spirit that runs the mind and the body in that order, and if we yield to the spiritual intuitions that we have, not the mind, not the brain particularly, because sometimes you make wrong choices, but just your intuition. Females have that in spades. I don't think we're trained as males a lot in our society to cultivate that. It's like they just really do know what to do sometimes. Right, Melissa? These are the principles. These are only a few of them. Principle of gravity. Gravity is nothing more than pressure. The Earth spins, and by centrifugal force pulls us in and makes us associate with the molecular structure that we'll talk about later on, or molecules, or atoms. And everything is only a wave energies. So you have the principle of in and out, because when you go to outer space, which we're going to be doing in 2024 to the moon as a country, and you don't have a suit, a pressure suit, you will explode. You'll be all over the universe. That's where you're headed. It's really true. So the principle of balance, acid-base, we heard a lot about that. What is the greatest source of dysregulation is cane sugar. I'm from Hawaii. My wife is too, so is Bonnie. And we used to have cane sugar fields and pineapple fields. Now we have just GMO crops. Syngenta, Monsanto. We're one of the...
like that in Hawaii.
Huh?
I didn't know it was like that.
Oh, it's the biggest experimental station on the planet. Yeah. People don't know that. Plus, but the one thing, we don't have fluorine. Fluoridated water. That's due to my wife. The Pure Water Foundation. And we got a passage of an ordinance that they cannot put fluorine, any chemical substance, to prevent or treat a disease in water. And that covers fluorine. Principle of dawning, step by step. We only know things step by step. You're doing the research and you're finding out for your wife, you mentioned. That was very impressive for me. The principle of cleansing is what we'll be focusing on too. But some of these things may not be acceptable to your brain reflexes. But if you have an open mind, you can consider the possibility. You can just kind of hear it a bit and say, maybe that could be so, but I don't think so. And then just live with it a little bit longer. Principle of hardening. As we get to my stage in life, we get harder. I'll tell you, and it gets hard. Not harder, but your tissues condense, they sag, you become more oblate at the belly. And that's a natural process. That's human beings. The principle of prosperity. If you work for good, good will come back. And good, but then we don't know sometimes what's good. Doctors think that root canal therapy, from my point of view, and implants are good for people. I think that that's not so good. So, principle of forgiveness. Why hang on to the past? Somebody did wrong to you? Pray for their well-being. Pray for their happiness. Think about them and say, I hope he's successful. The principle of truth is what's so. Take life on life's terms. The principle of purity is what we'll focus on too. The principle of fulcrum, you know that one? If you want to get a bigger, heavier thing, you take a pry. The principle of tensional integrity is what we'll talk about. That's what the Carlson Bridge is. That's why I had that first slide, because it's a way of holding it to the teeth. It's not using cement or compressive, it's flexure. Strength is flexibility of the wing of the airplane, not rigidity. And I think that's true about our mind thoughts, or brain thinking. There's a distinction between brain thinking and mind thinking. Brain thinking is reflexive. Oh, I don't like that guy. He reminds me of so-and-so. And you don't even know you're thinking that, but it's going on. But the mind is open and capable of flowing with things. Not being subversive or submissive. If you have a principle that you're standing on, stand for it. I don't advocate the use of implants or root canal therapy. And I have a book that we just wrote called Death by Root Canal. Slow blood poisoning. That was known in the 20s and 30s in the last century. The doctors back then, Mayo Clinic fame, Rostenau, a lot of other physicians and dentists did not do root canal therapy. It wasn't until about 1945 that certain people got together in New York and they decided that they would save teeth, or the remnants. And so that happened, and eventually the American Association of Endodontics got started in 1965. A big factor there was Louis Grossman from Penn State. He said you had to sterilize your root canal, and you could, but we found out that's not possible. Can't do it. Okay, let's go from that to the principle of biology and physiology. Here in the conference hall, I was hearing people talk about metabolism. For, I think, maybe it's the first time I've ever heard other doctors talking about metabolism. But they were talking about the principles of biology and physiology in the 1930s, 1920s. If you read the old literature, they called it the dental cosmos. Interesting. It was the annual scientific review of dentistry going on in the United States. And some of the papers are just awesome, old language, but they were talking about the need of physiology, that we had to stay with the human being's acceptance and flexibility with the material. But they were still using amalgam fillings, because there was no, well, actually the amalgam filling issue, are you familiar with that? Okay. 1828, they dissolved the first dental association due to that factor, so you guys know that. So we won't go there. Metabolism is a life process. Nutrients in, nitrogenous waste, and carbon dioxide out. This is kind of a nice slide because it talks about catabolism, which is the destruction of the metabolic waste products, catabolism, and anabolism, when you're building up. So the life process has two. You take food in, it builds you up, you become very capable and bulky, you process, you mature, grow, and then when you get to 40 or 50, your body starts to change, hair starts to lose, maybe walking different, a little bit heavy side, your body just sags a little bit. And then when you're at my stage, it's sometimes advanced, but sometimes not. Depends on what, again, we've put into the metabolic furnace. That's anabolism, where you would take oxygen, food molecules, etc., and you would end up with energy and a cycle of cell growth and development. All the different factors. I won't go into those, I don't know them all, but here you have the destruction side. So you have construction and you have destruction. Destruction is not bad, or you could call it unconstruction. Something, I don't know. Anyway, here you have CO2, urea, lactic acid, and other products coming out through your pores right now, through your mouth, through your eyes, your fecal matter, your urine, your sweat. You're designed to eliminate toxins from your body. And right now, that's going on. About 3 pounds of material drop to the earth every day from your body. Mucus, cells, desquamation of cells, loss of teeth, heaven forbid. Now we talk about the principle of purity. And this, I think, from my point of view, has been missed by most all of us. The fact that below our skin, the conjunctiva of our eye, the linings of our ears, all other skin is purity. The fluid there is pure, sterile. There's no bacteria, no viruses, no other chemicals that will stop metabolism unless we ingest it and we allow it. So does that sound a little bit remarkable or different? That's what infection actually is. You can't have an infection of an infection. You have an infection of a sterile space. And that's the principle of metabolism, biology. The body will prosper and flourish if it is sterile, not procreatively, but sterile water. And that's true. To me, when I learned that again, about a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago, because I love physiology in dental school, I loved it. Because it's understandable to me. And then I remembered that that's true. And then I started to say, is it really sterile? I questioned myself, is it really sterile? So I went to different, about 2 years ago, to different textbooks, and sure enough, they said that all the water compartments within the human body are sterile, without bacteria, viruses, fungi, molds, yeasts, or alcohol, or methamphetamine, or oxycontin, or maybe thoughts that generate poison toxins, metabolites, or destructive things by, I hate that, like that. So sterility is a key factor. This is the huge pure tissue spaces of the body. These are the different organs that contain water in certain percentages. The human being's sterile content is about 8% of the teeth of the body. The brain is much more than that. But this visual alone, I think, and if you notice the skin, all out here you have bacteria, virus, fungi, pathogens we call them. We call them the antibiotics. We want to kill them. Einstein himself said, and this is in our book, in the conflict between microorganisms and technology, microorganisms will win. There's no way we can clean the skin because it's not meant to be cleaned in that sense. And our bodies are pure, so it's not meant to have that stuff within. So why do we do root canals and implants and give the openings for those things to take place? This is from Journal of Physiology, and it talks about the various different rheumatoid arthritis due to pollution from. This is a gal that did research. Her name is Kumara, and she did a beautiful paper on the fact that now we know they call it. I forget. They call it some collective term that includes both periodontal disease. See, we in dentistry separate periodontal disease from endodontic disease. We think an abscess in the deep confines of the bone is different than that. It's not. It's the same entity. It's the same ligament, the same embryonic tissue, and this condition leads to Alzheimer's. They're finding these associations. It doesn't cause, but it leads to it. It can lead to it. So we don't put non-sterile saline into our bodies. And if you look at injections from dental offices, carbocaine, lidocaine, they're all sterile sheaths. We use sterile needles because the transmission of disease can be minimized. You're still getting bacteria in your tissues, but the immune system can handle that. This is a picture of an odonton. Now, this one didn't turn out right here because there should be a blue line here. Excuse me. Yeah, a blue line here. I got the wrong slide, I apologize. And a red line. Anything below this level and this level of enamel is sterile, the tooth anatomy. And this again is the previous slide, just to associate the systemic or oral systemic. Dentists were not trained about oral systemic relationships. That term came out, I think, at the turn of the 21st century, the first time I ever heard oral systemic. They used to call it septicemia, or relationship between teeth and infection in the body, focal theory of infection. So a sea cucumber is basically a tube. It has its mouth and its oculi. That means anus. This is what it looks like schematically. We're the same way. Food in, food out. Metabolism takes place in these layers so the body prospers and flourishes. And of course the ocean is pure, sterile, except by Hanama Bay in Hawaii and Ala Moana now, with the effluents and the water treatment system, right? So the principle of cleansing or purity is what we next will look at. And this is something that sounds so simple, but the fact is that you're designed to push things out if they don't belong there. You eat pizza that's tainted, or it goes into diarrhea. That's called purification. It's not bad. It can be inconvenient and embarrassing, but it's a way of God's designed you to cleanse. So you maintain sterility of the internal part of the body, and not the gut is not sterile. You know, the fluid, the sea cucumber was an example of how the skin comes in over the mouth, down the tongues, and right down through that portal. And all of that is not sterile. It's meant to not be sterile, because the microorganisms are actually our friends, except when they get out of balance, and they will assist in the metabolism and transport across the membranes. It gets really complicated, and I don't care to bore people with the technicalities of this chemical structure, like that, and this is the physiology of that. So just the main idea is that you're designed to push toxins out. Cancer is actually toxins incarcerated in the tissues of the body. They're walled off and protecting the rest of the body. That's the purpose of the sheath around a tumor. And metastasis, or transmigration of these cells, let's say mitose, will be minimized with that sheath. It's like a callus on your hand. Excuse me. So it works better this way. This is an example, my own example, of the cleansing process. 7 days, about 10 days before I took this photograph of my finger, I had been walking through a garden and I brushed aside an asparagus plant like it was disrespectful, and it bit me. It was not bad, but this landed in my hand and I didn't know what it was. And 10 days later, I had this pus exudate. It was red, swollen. The 5 signs of disease are calor, heat, dolor, pain, tumor, swelling, and red rubor, and loss of function. So I couldn't really operate well with my finger, because when I would go like this, it would cause discomfort in my ligaments. So that's why I turned it. So I wondered what this was, and I took a photograph of it, and then it disappeared. This was in 2002. 7 days later, after that photograph that you just saw, it covered over. And I thought, well, I'm done. That's taken care of that. It just was a scrape. And I thought I was okay. But the pain was not much. I'm kind of impervious to that, except sometimes. But about, well, let's see, it's 6 to 11 is about 5 days later. Yeah, I found this, and I suspected that there was something still stuck in there. So I took a cow horn explorer, a dental tool, on myself, and I dug into the tissue, and I lifted out this thorn. You see it right here. And a dead tooth is like a dead thorn. It has no circulatory system. It's an object, a foreign object. And then here's the thorn again. And we move on to this one. You have the thorn. I thought, well, I'm going to send it to a pathology lab to check it out. Because I do that with dead teeth, right? So I took the thorn and the tissue specimen from around the thorn, and I sent it to pathologist, and this is what he found. Granulation tissue, or granuloma, he called it, I think. It's kind of hard to read. Granulation tissue with acute chronic inflammation, abscess. As I told him, it was pus. It was pus. I saw that. So he talks about the picture of the tissue was highly inflamed. Severe acute chronic inflammation. That's the redness. So this confirmed, now this is 2 days after the thorn was removed, without pus formation. This is the final one, 2 months after you did. I knew nothing. It was magic to me that I healed like that. I mean, it's imagine if we really recognize the gift that is arranged in our body's ability to recover. Now, it doesn't mean we can't assist it. I mean, we want to be prudent about that. If you have a massive bacterial infection of the eye or jaw, it's good to take some antibiotics. Modern medicine is not all bad. It's just misused, I think, a lot of times. So that's the principle of cleansing. We call it, in Japanese, it's called o-misogi harahi. And it means to scrape off. Misogi. O means honorific. Misogi. Harahi is to open up the positive spiritual aspect. I like that. This is a classic. This is what we did in dental school with cadavers. These are the boys. This is about 1908, I think, at Maryland School of Dentistry. And you'll see a bigger slide of this. But what is missing in a dead human body or dead dental organ, this is what we pick out. Kind of graphically gross and odorized. It's horrendous. So this is a crown. This is the root. It was split. This is the pus sac. And I clean these out and send them to pathologists. And that's in our book too, over 400 over the last 32 years. And it confirms almost to 100% marked acute chronic inflammation, bacteria, granulation tissue, reactive bone, which is bone, they sometimes mistake it for bone cancer. But anyway, this is what you got. Principles of circulation, that's the real deep state. If you have no circulation, you don't live. Electronically too, your nerves are very part of that electrical system, but the blood vascular system it's also an electronic system. There's no electricity per se, but the chemical shifts cause an apparent movement of impulses that run our body. It's called the saltatory response in a nerve. Chloride shift goes boom, boom, boom like that, and it's really magic. This is a circulatory system. It's said that it takes about 30 seconds for a pint of blood to circulate the entire system. So the blood are related to the toes. We weren't taught that in dental school, but we should have concluded that. This is the lymphatic system, the other draining system, other than the blood vascular system. This is the one that's very subtle and will alert you with the swelling. We have the thymus, go back here. The thymus, which is a autoimmune or a gland that they say disappears in adult age, which is not true. It's an autoimmune gland, much like the marrow of the bones. Or the spleen. Spleen produces blood cells of different type. We don't know all of these things. But it's quite remarkable the way the network is that keeps us sterile. The next level up is the electrical system called the meridians, or the bioenergetic flow through bioenergetic portals. So the meridians overlay the underlying tissue. You can see them, not see them, but you can locate them with certain devices on the exterior. In other words, certain acupuncture points you can locate. And this is, I think, Melissa, what is this? The lung, large intestine?
Yeah.
Yeah. The toes, obviously, they run up. So this is a subtle circulatory system. There are how many paired meridians? 12, 6 and 6, yeah? Flowing in, it's said, and out. Yin and yang. Compression, tension. Compression, expansion. Everything degasses or gases. Compresses. Odonton is what we're talking about in dentistry. It has the ligaments, the gum tissue, the bone, the blood vessels coming in. And again, everything outside here is unsterile. Everything here is sterile. And it's like a tree. If you take the bark off a tree will die. If you take the enamel off a tooth, the tooth will die. That's why you don't do crown preparations. I used to do them. And I still do some. I haven't done a crown for maybe 25 years, 30 years. But they do this all the time. It's called enamel peel. They will take a new tooth, because it has some blemishes, like fluorosis, and they will cut the tooth just into a stub and put a cap over it. And then the tooth dies and damage. It's called, in the 20s and 30s in the United States, that technology, of course they didn't have the air rotor at that time, nor did they have that kind of technology to do porcelain fused to metal crowns. That didn't come in until the 70s, so they didn't do that. But they still called it mutilation. So my wife, here we got the boys again. The stool, got a little cigar here. But the sterile ganglion toes here show up. There, well, what's mummification? What was the purpose of mummifying? Was the spiritual relationship of the soul spirit to return to the body in ancient Egypt to commune with the ancestors or siblings, and to also partake of the good food or the riches of the material world. So the Egyptians knew that this is where we go. We go out into the stars, and then we still have access through the body. I don't know if that's true, but in Japan they have tablets where ancestors can come to, and you can offer food and drink. They don't do that. It's a spiritual essence that they partake in. So anyway, it was possible to live again. It was a specific religious belief, but in our culture, attempts to preserve the corpse of the tooth for the new religion, science. We think that that is scientific. And to me, it's, when I woke up, in 1980, 81, 82, it was barbaric. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And then I went back and did the history search, but that awakening came with a guy by the name of Reinhold Vold, electronics, called the Dermatron. And he had said in one of his lectures in 81 that 50% of all the surgeries are done in the oral cavity. Unless a person has that aspect taken care of, he can't help them. He can minimally help, assuage things. This is a gangrenous toe. Doesn't look like healing to me. The microbes are there. It's blood poisoning. That's what they used to call it, blood poisoning. And what are the microbes doing there? Nobody answers that question. This is two teeth that were removed. Black, yellow-gray, odor, horrific. Root canal term mummification in the 1900s. Similarity or differences? Here, and this is an x-ray. I'll just tell you what's happening here, if I can. This lady had a crown done on this tooth. Kind of ill-fitting, but when you do a full crown, like I said earlier, it causes shock to the tooth will die. And then you'll get this darkened halo around. This is abnormal bone architecture. Should look like this. And of course you have it here on the root canal tooth. It's running all the way up the crotch of the tooth and along here and all in here. That's called apical periodontal disease, mummification. In pure tissue spaces, remember, bounce it off the fact that it's in a pure tissue space and it's subject to metastasize or migrate to other parts of the body. This is a very famous, very famous endodontist, Figueroa, and he's written extensively about the severity of the apical disease and the subtlety, its stealth, and it's a big problem in our culture and we don't know it. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the number of visits. This is the pathology report. The mummification of the dead human body is similar to this. Does it make sense to use both for human? And what about the internal spaces? The pathology, some people will look at the x-ray, I'm going to go back quickly here. They will look at the x-ray, the dentist will have the patient come in, take an x-ray, look at this, and if he doesn't see it, he says it's not there. Do you have any symptoms? No, I'm okay. But then what you've got is this subtle toxemia being developed through the entire body, circulatory system. Abscess tooth migrates to the forehead, the eyes, the mouth, or the chin, down the neck, shoulders, thorax, feet. Again, this is a kind of a little bit gross maybe, but you have a dead tooth here, a root canal that was done. This is a fractured one that you just saw. This is the material retrieved. That's called decapitation. In other words, you clean it out. This gentleman is about 89. He had an old root canal, no indication of an abscess around it. But when we removed it and sent it to the path lab, he had dead bone, osteonecrosis they call it, fibrosis, which is scar tissue. And they equivocate. The reason I put this slide up is that this is the way we as dentists look at things. We look at the terminal portals of what we call the root chamber. And we argue among ourselves, and I don't do this, but the endodontists argue whether or not you should end the root filling before the opening, at the opening, or beyond the opening. And they've got thousands of research papers to prove that one way is right and one way is wrong. And they're begging the question, the entire system is infected. The root canal is pathology by nature, by its definition. So I just put that there. And this is a lady that came to me years ago. She had an indication of abscess. Previous to this, it was much smaller. It was about half size. That was in 2004, I think it was. But 2008, she came in. This was an ameloblastoma that was connected directly to the root canal. An ameloblastoma is a very aggressive neoplastic, not cancer, but it destroyed her whole jaw. It eats away, it just dissolves everything. And that's its mechanism. You do leave dead tissue in your jaw, called the root canal. Bacteria, viruses, and fungi have at it with the jawbone. That was the best example to me of the veracity of the infected nature of our microorganisms. This was the pathology report. Ameloblastoma, she had bacteria, she had dead bone, granulation tissue, repair, and stuff like that. But she eventually had her whole jaw resected. Bone transplant from the leg to here. Turned out very nicely. I didn't do it. It was done by an oral surgeon. I'm a dental surgeon, not an oral surgeon, but I do oral surgery. I'm allowed to do that. But I hope I know my limits. This one was major. She had to be taken to California. This I just put up here for the purpose of showing that E. fecalis, which is a bacteria, is rife throughout the entire body in all portals. This is what we deal with. This is kind of a convoluted conversation, but there are actinomyces, there are bacterioids, there are all sorts of fancy names that will put you to sleep. So we won't do that. This is an implant. I didn't do this. It's a picture of somebody who did do this. And what they're doing is they're going to go in and remove the infected tissue around the screw post. Excuse me. And the bone. This is the bone destruction. And later I'll show you a way you can replace this missing tooth with the Carlson Bridge. And the Carlson Bridge is not my bridge, it's God's bridge, it's for my ancestors. That's how I named it. I didn't name it for Ron Carlson. I'm no rocket scientist. I got a couple of patents on it, but it's just a new way of doing things. And I thought this would be cool. Worked for me.
So was it exposed already, or?
No, this was
open it up.
What the oral surgeon will do when they see peri-implantitis. Remember, peri-implantitis is the disease du jour of all implants. Recent studies, they've had this explosion of peri-implantitis. That means inflammation, itis. Peri means around, implant means the implant. And what you see here is soft, gunky tissue. It's like soft, gunky tissue and no bone. What they normally do is they will go in and they will drill out that entire area, and they will take cadaver bone, chicken bone, bovine bone, synthetic bone, the ham bone, the elbow bone, the foot bone, and they'll jam that in there. They'll sew it up and they'll say, pay the cashier. I remove them. It's kind of brutal work, but again, the 30 that I've done to date have all shown up like the root canals. Bacteria, granulation tissue, scar tissue, fibrosis, necrotic bone, and the patient has no feeling. How are you feeling with that implant? Oh, I can chew on it, it's okay. But they've got this fomenting infection, and nobody knows.
Carlson, what's your step-by-step protocol in removing an implant?
A lot of good anesthesia. Vitamin C, I think that's probably a missed element. A lot of big megadoses of vitamin C. I like the lipospheric. I've just been taking it myself. It's really nice. And I think it's had some effect on my ability to move a little bit better. I don't know that for sure, but I think so. Anesthesia, good radiology, good x-ray of where you're going to go, and then you open it up, and you have to take a drill bit and go around the implant, just like you're going to do a tooth. And you separate the bone from the implant, and you slowly work it with loving care and gentility, and eventually it loosens. Because bone is compressible, and then you kind of work it out, just draw it out. We don't pull teeth in dentistry, at least I don't. It's called drawing. That's an old term from France. You know, that's one gal said, "They're going to rip it out of my head." And I said, "Oh no, God forbid, get rid of that word, because the word creates a picture, right?" It's like, scared me. I said, "No, we're going to gingerly, lovingly, carefully remove the matter."
Do you use ozone in your practice?
No. The blood is ozonated naturally with oxygen. So I think a lot of times we try to second guess the physiology. I think it could be helpful, I don't know, but I know it's very transitory. When you do an ozone treatment of the gingiva, it lasts for maybe 30 seconds if that, and then it's gone. So I don't like to do extraneous, non-productive work. Or like this platelet-enriched fibrin. I mean, it sounds good to me. But biologically, I think you just do the best you, make sure the pathology's out, or the dead tissue, sew it up, thank the patient, and say, I'll see you tomorrow morning. And then many of them receive the divine light that we are offering. And I've not had, since I've been practicing for 30 years with the spiritual path, I do not have the hematomas, the ecchymosis, they call it the black and blue, or the complaints. It's amazing. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. You'd say that in a big lecture and they baloney. You know, let's go get the beer. But this is what we're up against. This is a patient of mine. She had an implant put in here. All the bone, when they tell you the bone will regenerate or grow back because of the implant, no. This is all scarfed out. She has, I'll show you the x-ray. This is good bone here. But curiously, I've had this experience in about 5 patients now with a tooth close to or behind or in front of that implant has severe decay to the pulp chamber. I can't figure it out, but I think it's affecting the blood, electrical supply from the nerve, so you have biophysiological breakdown of that dental organ. Because these 2 teeth are kissing cousins. They sit on the stomach spleen, stomach pancreas meridian. And she wasn't having any problems with that, and she wasn't having any pain. But she just knew that she had malaise, which is tiredness. No, that's a good French word. So we had the pus. I got this photograph at the right time. This is actually an artifact. And this was into the pulp chamber. So I took both of them out. Oh, this is the picture of the x-ray. This is the implant with the pus coming out. This is bone degradation, bone architectural changes. She had a lot going on here. This was okay. But here she had lost all the tissue and it almost broke in half. We took both of them out and we did a bridge. This was a screw post and the pathology of sulfur granules from actinomyces. Actinomyces is a bacteria that's a normal resident of your mouth. The reason I mention it, it's a huge amount of them. I think hundreds of thousands, if not billions of them. Different classification of actinomyces. It's a normal resident, but it should not be in the jaw. And when I took this out, the pathology said it's in the jaw. And what is the purpose of the actinomyces in nature and soil ecology? That the actinomyces bacteria is designed, along with candida and along with spirochetes, to decompose roots of dead trees. So to me, it really maps on.
It's doing its job.
Yeah. It's doing its job. That's right. These are not bad guys. But we want to throw nuclear at them. Antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, OxyContin, and people get hooked, and then you have a drug issue beyond the tooth issue. This was the pathology. Variable necrotic bone, chronic inflammation with actinomyces. They give a little bit more specific picture when at the tissue level for the dental surgeon or the physician, so that they can justify they're going to school so long.
Was that the only microbe that they found?
That's the only, when I send, this happened back in 1981, 82, and 84. I didn't believe this. I did, no way. I know root canals are okay, even though I did physiology. Nobody ever talked about the pure tissue spaces as being the foundation or the principle for health. Vole, I was in a lecture with this guy, Vole, he said that he would not clean up, he would not treat people unless they had the root canals removed. He's German, from Berlin. And he's the one that invented the Dermatron, very elegant machine that Dawn uses and other people use. And he said, and I'm a young guy, about 46 or so, 42. And I'm listening, and I made big money on root canals. It's a good profit center. I didn't think of it that term. I just thought I was really helping people. The point is that I wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing. So I hypothesized, not theorized, that there could be some tissue, even to jawbone, that I'm not seeing. And so I started sending, I was the only dentist in town, the only dentist I think in the United States, that sent me to the pathology lab. I did not ask for what bacteria was there. The pathologist, Kurt Karada, offered me 1 or 2 times that I see star-like or filamentous bacteria colonies, more than likely actinomyces. He said that, I didn't. So every time I send a submission, which has been about 450 times, I ask him bacteria, question mark. And he always fulfills that. So I'm not doing like Huggins did with the idea of certain bacteria. I don't think it really matters from my point of view. I think intellectually it might satisfy us a little bit more. So there were billions and billions and billions. I just say if there's one, there are billions and billions and billions. It's simple to me. Now they know that the herpes virus is infecting the implants and the bone and the root canals. They're finding these, you can't find them easily because they don't show up in staining and the microbiology. So our culturing methods or way of seeing are very barbaric or very archaic. They don't do energetically. Now you can do it with certain energy testing and stuff like that with new machines. And maybe the new, I can't do that. Anyway, we'll move on here. These are some of the common fungi. So years ago when I was in dental school, they never talked of these things. They said just sterilize the canal, which you can, and you must, and you'll have a successful root canal. I've never seen a successful root canal that's infected with bacteria. Just not so. So the principle of decomposition. That's the other side of composition. Your body is composed for your mom and dad under the authority of the big universal God. Okay, you're allowed to do that. And you're nurtured and grow. And then you get to 40, 50, 60 and you start to decompose. It's a natural process. It's one in which it's going to take place and you just say, oh, thank you very much. I'll do my best to harmonize with you. So I don't run like I used to do marathons and triathlons and stuff like that when I was in the 80s. I don't do that anymore. And my wife is trying to get me to walk, but I got some toe problems. I think it's more to the Haagen-Dazs. So it's me, not them. Appearance and disappearance. That's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, these are the stages of death or decomposition. This happens not only in the human body, but in the tooth. There's autolysis, self-digestion. Excuse me, come on, Karen. The catalysts, the other products, start to take care of the dead, non-functioning tissue. They got to get the waste products out, so they start to decompose themselves. So rigor mortis sets in, muscle stiffening, small blisters, they rupture and loosen, direct and gross. And then we go into the stage of bloat, swelling. That's why the doctor says, when I tap your tooth, is there any pain? It's because of this. They know automatically, if you go like that, that tooth is hyperreactive, more than likely to gas. They don't think of gas gangrene, and they don't think of gas fluids or purulent exudates, fancy words for pus sacs and stuff like that. They just, if you don't respond to a tap, they say it's okay. Not always. So you have to be kind of like Inspector Clouseau. Make sure that you know your territory. This is my little mommy. They talked about you could seal a root canal hermetically. Hermetically means a pure seal. That's a word of art from the 60s and 70s. They've gotten rid of it, but they're still bringing it back now. That's what they're talking about. They're now filling root canals with MTA, which is Portland cement, and other materials in that stuff. You know that. So the microorganisms, they create the putrefaction, the odor. You go to the third stage, active decay, the bacteria, viruses, and fungi. The immune system has been already alerted. It comes in, and it makes these little pus sacs. These are holding tanks for purulent fluids. They're a protective mechanism. But we think it's an abscess or an endodontic disease. And if we just snip off the roots, everything will be okay. So what they do in endodontics is they will resect the tooth or retreat it, or they call it orthograde or apical ectomies and stuff like that. Then what happens to the body, if it's in a proper setting, the bone will decompose. That takes a long time. Here you see an example of a tooth that actually has no tissue all the way through here. It's got an amalgam filling that's hanging out like that. You can't believe it. And there's some decay here. But this is skeletonization. Skeletonization. And it's taking place in this one and also over here in the bone. This lady has no bone around the root. The body will actually cause the dissolution of the bone and a lot of the tooth to fall out. It just falls out like an implant sometimes. The principle of alternatives. You can equivocate and argue root canal or no root canal. That's called a box. And that's what we've done for 200 years, is we've argued the advisability of leaving dead tissue in the body. The other one is bioengineering, what they're doing now, big time in Japan, with a rat. They take these stem cells, single cells, epithelial, mesenchymal they call it. They put it in a collagen gel. They culture it. They extract the tooth of the rat. They put this little ball in there. It looks like that. And here's the photographs. You see the emergence of a new tooth and the appearance of a new tooth. That's what will be happening, I believe. I don't know when. Probably after I'm gone. But again, we have, this didn't show up. We have two ways to go. Either creative regeneration, bioengineering, which is a new pipe, and then we don't argue about whether you should or shouldn't do root canals. It's at a dead end. It really becomes oxymoronic to the health of the person. And we get turf wars. I mean, like Dawn Ewing had the Netflix film taken down. That's called First Amendment violation, but that's what's going on. Internet. I go to YouTube, but not Netflix. I don't do that stuff. But I know I've heard so much about the control of the big companies, corporatization of our country, rather than the Constitution and the Republic. We become a corporatocracy. And the elite, and both Democrats and Republicans. Doesn't matter. It's like the root canal, not root canal. Melissa, are you okay? Principle of wave, vibrations, or transformation. This gets into a little bit more esoteric sciences. This is a book from the 80s, right, Melissa? Okay. Gerber, talking about vibrational medicine. This is Emoto. My wife knows him and worked with him. He talked about how everything you say gets crystallized. We call that in Japanese, kotodama. Spiritual essence of words. When you say a thing, it crystallizes. So you have to be careful what you say. Say, oh, thank you very much, even though somebody stepped on your toe. And it's a hard practice. It's not easy. I know it. This is actually the life stream continuity. You're nothing more than a sine wave. Your spiritual body, we'll talk about that in a minute. But above this line is life, gravity. It condenses you into a ball. You live and then you evaporate into the ethers. Death is radiation. You decompose, but your soul spirit does not stay in your body, from my understanding, nor my acceptance of that kind of thinking. Oh, excuse me. This is was this the next one? Yeah, here's the next one. This is a metaphor for a human body. You are the solid ice, liquid too, and that liquid will go into the cloud and recrystallize as liquid and go to ice again. That's a full cycle of life for ice and trees, the oak tree, the plants, the corn, stuff like that. The essence of the spiritual pattern, or the pattern, is within the kernel of the corn, in the seed of the acorn. You can't see it. It's quite remarkable. I mean, I tried to find it a couple times, but it's not there. Same with apples. Newton was half right. He only talked about a falling apple. And he said gravity is mathematically. But he did not stick around long enough to watch it go into liquid form, into gas, evaporate to CO2 or whatever else constitutes. And then the CO2 is eaten by the beautiful plants, and you get apples again. That's the cycle of life. My little son, thank you very much. This is the evaporation of that tooth that we saw before. The dead tooth has no circulation, no electrical system. It will be starting to be decomposed by the bacteria. They will start their action. The immune system will come in and decompose that and actually eventually push it out, like here. But the oral surgeon or dental surgeon, my mission is to do the removal if I have to and clean the jawbone. So that's evaporation. Again, the human transformation of the body. These are what we're composed of: nitrogen, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen. 98% of us. That's your molecular, your atomic structure. You've got molecules and different functions. I mean, it gets really beyond my ability to even conceive it. But that's what you've got. So that brings in, this is from Walter Russell, a very important concept to hold or not. But death is nothing more than a veil. Life and death interchange, he called it. That's called the zero cube universe. And you have life crystallizing on one side, then decomposing. It's death. And then it becomes life again. It gets to the peak and it reverses. We go back and forth. Now, what reason? That's a good question. I mean, like, we could get into some of the reasons I know, answers to it, but it would be beyond the scope of this presentation. Our eye sees only 1/1,000,000th of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's all. We are very limited. We don't see other information coming in. That's our mission, to just see that wavelength. This is the wavelength again. So we have very limited vision. This is the periodic table. We've learned this in chemistry. When I was young, there was no 118 elements. 118. I think it was 103. But they keep locating other wave compression events. These are events. They're not real. I mean, they're real in the sense that they're compressed and visually, you can see them sometimes when they burn, or you can see them sometimes in certain scopes, but not really. So the whole understanding is that you have to know that this periodic table is what we live with daily, planet Earth. This is another form of the the periodic table to me makes sense because this other one, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'll go back. This shows no relationship to coming in or out. It's static. It's a good thing for chemistry because you can combine certain things, the atomic weight, you can do quantitative analysis, etc. But this one, if you take and read from left to right, this is alphanon. It's a noble gas. It was elucidated by Walter Russell, not Einstein. They're finding now that these noble gases, which have no charge, they are actually like black holes. They are the source of certain chemical elements according to they call it the 9-string harp. Now, this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. So alphanon comes into, one of them, here it is. Alphanon goes into this next element due to pressure coming into the planet. It forms hydrogen, and then it goes in, does that say helium? I don't think. Beryllium. Hydrogen, beryllium. I can't remember that. But anyway, basically this is the hydrogen thing, I'm sorry. Hydrogen, carbon, silicon, cobalt, lithium or something like that. And then it goes into the radioactive elements. That's what radioactive elements are. They're the most compressed molecular structure that started here. So you have transformation of chemical elements from one to another. Hydrogen becomes maybe carbon. I don't know this for sure, but this is the kind of concept. And as soon as it gets to a point where if the compression is so great, it goes back out, it divides gravity and goes back out into the universe as waves, not particles. There's no particles. Everything is wave energy that condenses and coils. I will show it here. Oh, this is another chart of Russell's showing the composition of the human being. There's a 98% here. And again, the direction is this way, to the radioactive elements. Then they disappear into the universe and then reappear through condensation. This kind of concept of raining. Is this okay for you guys? Okay. This is a photon, cosmic photon, that starts spinning. It goes into a coil, a compressed coil, and at a certain point it explodes back into the radiation elements, the radioactive elements, uranium, radon, other things like that. This is a model that shows the compression of maybe a human being or an Earth. These are the connect points to the noble gases. And we come in compressing, and we go back out expanding. So it just makes it a little bit more sensible to me. This is what the ancients said about gold, where it came from. It's quite fascinating because it was falling from the sun to the earth. That's the Aztecs. The metal of gods. The Romans thought that gold had descended from the sun. Pretty accurate. But if you presented this in a normal scientific conversation, they would laugh at you. But you have to understand, if you go to really great scientists like Einstein or Buckminster Fuller, who coined the term spaceship Earth, and read some of their work, they will show you that it does come from the cosmos. We're cosmic beings on a compression form, spaceship Earth. So you have the rock star descending to the Earth, etc. We'll go on. The pure tissue spaces I go back to, because this is the human physical form. Underneath the skin, the epidermis, all of this is pure. We'll go on more. The next layer, at least in my conceptioning, physically, from my own intuition is the energetic field that they say, Tennant says it's running along the fascial planes. Makes sense to me, but my wife knows more. She's a doctor of acupuncture. Do you have any comment on that? Okay, keep going, she's saying. Okay, we're almost done. Again, acupuncture meridians are energies of channel, flow. It crosses here the molar. This is stomach spleen, stomach pancreas. It goes through the bicuspid areas. The molar areas are that right here. This is liver, lung intestine, liver, lung intestine. So they cross that. Large intestine, yes, thank you. This is the frontal area. This is called the governor vessel. Is it at this level? Governor vessel? This goes conception. Before.
Meets the governing of the lip.
Right. It actually comes around like this, energetically. And that can be tested with certain devices. You can pick up the current flow.
So you can see why dental infection messes it all up.
Yes. And that's the next part of the lecture. Thank you. You're ahead of me. So this just gives you an idea of that second layer. I call it the mental field. That's related somehow to the spiritual, but we'll get into that in a moment. This is a blown fuse. A tooth acts like a blown fuse. How many you have your home? But you have an electronic system. You have circuit breakers or fuses. You know what a fuse is? Yeah. Fuse is a piece of metal that blows to protect you from burning down your house. That's what a tooth is. This is a diagram showing that when you don't have a circuit breaker, sometimes it will melt. If you have a power source that's too big, you'll get a fire. But here you have a fuse, and if you blow the fuse, the whole thing shuts down, and that's what a tooth is. It's like a circuit breaker. This is a circuit breaker, a little representation of that. Related to dental pain, root canals, this is what the number of millions that go in 2010 to the emergency room for dental abscesses or dental infections. It's a huge problem, but one overlooked. The ER is filled with this. This is from Ontario. Doctor, I don't know this doctor, but the seriousness of dental infections that go untreated are treated too late, are bigger problems than we had estimated. And that's what this conference is about. Root canal cover-up, mining, 1994. He took research done by Weston Price in the 30s and documented it. And there are videos of him on YouTube. I saw one in the old fart. This is our current book. We like to play with terms, we call it mortem. Pre-mortem by good Dr. Kenyon, who's not here, and Dr. E is my wife, the post-mortem. And I do the mortem. I do documentate. It's got some research in it that verifies the fact. Like in a court of law, you could give the book to the judge and say, this is a research. If you want, you can get the original documents and give it to you. This young dentist that took out the root canal did the right thing. Possibly. So this is the true medical dental science project. We're initiating it here. It is actually the principle of spirit, mind, and body, not body, mind, and spirit, in that order. It's critical, because unless we go back to our original condition as spiritual beings, we're DOA, dead on arrival. We see it. And the solution to the issues are not particularly physical or mental. You can argue all you want. Do all the drugs you need to do to assuage an infection. or infection of the Washington District of Criminals. Or you can spiritually purify yourself and offer prayers of gratitude for everything, even DC. This is a diagram showing the primal function of most religious organizations or the current condition. People think that these things, it's undecipherable, I apologize. This is the area of philosophy, theology, religion, other stuff, perceptual, physical reality, sense perception. You have 5 senses, we're limited. We know touch, but we're not actually touching. It's just a field, vibrational. It has an effect. We go from we think with our brain or mind. The brain is a reflexive tool. It kicks when it needs to, but the mind is like you. You said, I'm open. I want to know more about this. And that's what the mind is. That's the eternal flame as a function of the spirit and the soul. The soul being the connection to the great God, the one, and we're all together. So most of the time we're figuring out everything at this level, the visible. We've got concept altered perceptual reality. Disease is a word that doesn't exist. It doesn't really exist in reality, only cleansing. But we call it lymphoma, we call it apical abscess. It's only the body doing what it needs to do. It's cleanse, elimination. So this is the traditional spiritual model that we deal with. But we don't know the next level, excuse me, here. There's another realm. I can't prove it, but I can assert it. And I can declare it. It's upstream. If you purify a stream upstream, the midstream and lower stream become purified. Doesn't mean better than other people. It means that all of a sudden your life starts to shift toward more comprehensible, peaceful, productive allowance. And that's what the Mind Cuddy group is about, our spiritual organization. It's from Japan originally, but it's all over the country now. And people give light. This is in process. You have to learn that we're permitted to do that. And it works. So in the physical world, you will have the body following the spirit rather than reversed. Most of us are down here in the initial stage. We're animals. But when you come to this point, you start to broach into or enter into genius. Right, Melissa? Yeah, let's go here. So I only have 15 minutes. This is anatomy, spiritual anatomy. It looks at the yellow body as the physical. This is the acupuncture meridians, the mental, and my conceptioning. And the sterile tissue spaces is the spirit, mind, and the main soul. This is a seat of desire, procreation, getting the job done. You have this, that's right here. Na'au. China, I think Hawaiian. Na'au. The art of true light. God's light, not ours. This is my wife, Dr. Yi, giving to this one. We're up at UH. This is the main soul that we give to for 10 minutes, only that, and then we can give the rest of the body. This is the pineal gland, the seat of the soul by Descartes. Christ called it the one eye, or if your eye be single, you'll see the kingdom of heaven. I believe that's what he was meaning, and he knew these things. This is the pineal gland. Pineal gland, again, related to the midbrain, which is the center of a lot of activity. The purpose of the art of true light is not to heal illness, but to enable humankind to participate in the great divine work of achieving the divine plan. At the same time, to advance on the path of attaining divine nature, through the purification of the Trinity of the spirit, mind, and body, as another diagram showed. To resurrect our original power as children of God. That's our original power in Eden. The new age, in Japanese they call it the age of Kanagara, the golden age. That was the age of Eden. Man was connected directly to God. And the creation story, or the fall of man, is only a metaphor to show that we walked away from that connection. But God had something to do with it too. So we can't blame ourselves. We don't blame. We just acknowledge the fact that that's the way it was, and we're moving into a new dimension. Now, many of the things that we're talking about are not acceptable to some minds, so it's okay. Just sit with it. So we go on to these are the Okiomi zones, or purification points. This is the main soul, forehead, number 8. Then you have the clavicle, number 10. And the purpose is to move the energy, to purify it. The Master said that your human beings are right-hand spin, condensing, crystallizing, and then when you give light, you're opening up Ra'akut. You're giving a different spin to the energy. And you can feel, some people feel the heat, they feel relief immediately when they receive. I do, as a dental surgeon, I give myself light on my shoulder after I've done some heavy work in the office, and 2 or 3 minutes, it's gone. Not all the time, depends on my attitude. Stomach area, over here, down here. Dental area, oftentimes I'll give light in these areas to allow the chi, or we call it the divine energy, to flow more readily. And it's all integrated. The body, mind, and spirit is all integrated. You can't really separate it anatomically. These are concepts or ways of understanding, models. And unless we can model it, we're not going to move in that direction. And I think that's what this seminar is about. Unfortunately, it gets convoluted to me. And I'm a good chemist and biologist. I listen to this mechanisms, and it's overwhelming. I don't want to remember that. I know the physiology and the biology, and that's it. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to do a brief promo. Oh, what?
Can you show us the Carlson?
Yeah, here you are. It's a tooth replacement system. This is the diagram I did. Excuse me. 1995. I did my first iteration of the Carlson Bridge on a patient from Maui who said to me, "Can you build a bridge for me without cutting my teeth?" I said, "No, you can't do that, Joseph. You got to cut the teeth." I'm a dentist, right? I know that. And all of a sudden I went, maybe if we did this and that, a flash came in. And so this is years later, but I did the first one for Joseph. It was in the molar area, upper left. It lasted 7 years. The reason he lost it was the tooth and back was periodontally involved. It was loose, going like that, and anything would have missed. So here is a lower right bicuspid area. That's a molar here, bicuspid. She has a modest composite. This is a wing pontic that I craft, and we sell this in kits so doctors can learn how to do it if they're wanting to. This is fitting it in. You grind it in such a way or adjust it so it fits in the way you want it. Kind of like beat it up, like it's good carpentry. And this is with the soft composite affixed to the teeth, and you lower it into place because you've already predetermined this. Then you cure it with the light, the light curing. This is an overabundance of material. Now you must sculpt it. Here's the sculpting. Turned out very beautifully. This is, I forget when this was, about 10 years ago, I think. This is a good friend of mine. It was a dead tooth that had to come out. It was abscessed. This was done in 2005 and reported in Dentistry Today, 2006. This is the abscess around the tooth. That's the wound. And I took out the enamel, the little filling here. And then I built a stent. That's the stent, I call it. And then I start weaving. This is the old methodology. I don't use this anymore. I don't even use the stent, but I can. This is the build up and bulked up. This is the shape shaving and contouring, I call it. She has a defect at the gum line that will be there and will continue to expand because the bone will remodel or shrink back, and the clot will disappear and skin like that. The bone won't regenerate completely until about 9-10 months or a year. But then she had to come back and have the cervical addressed, because you can add to this and take it away. If another tooth is lost, you can add to what you've already got. You can, if it pops a joint, breaks here, which some of them do, they separate, you just go back in and you dovetail and clean up it. You have to do some steps. You just refuse it and re-articulate it. It's really fun. It's very artsy craftsy, and I like doing it. It works. Lower anterior, we have this a lot among our elderly. This is the pontic. Come on in! This is it putting in. It's soft now, and I'm going to cure it. This is the sculpting phase, and that's the finished. And that's it. Those are two examples. It can be done in molars, upper, lower, eye teeth, things like that. I think it's a good alternative. That's it. Thank you very much. Pardon? I'm to do what?
Any questions?
Oh, any questions?
I have a couple. So, like, my understanding of bridges, and correct me if I'm wrong, typically bridges can be taken, traditional.
Can be
bridges
taken
can be
on
taken
now.
out. This one, are these removable?
Well, they can be.
Okay.
I can take a burr and cut right through the joint, lift the pontic out, and re-establish the normal configuration of the tooth. The tooth has not been cut. There's no